for meeting of the McMinnville Water and Light Commission. I'd like to call the meeting to order and ask the clerk to do a roll call
Yes, Mayor Drapkin.
here, and you're very quiet. Oh, that's it.
Dad, how about now?
Better.
Right. Okay, thank you. Commissioner Tate,
Here.
Commissioner Tankersley is excused this evening, Commissioner Gormley,
Here.
and Commissioner Christensen.
Here. Thank you so much. Before we move into the meeting tonight, for those of you that haven't heard, former Mayor Rick Olson has passed away. And I would just appreciate if we could take a moment of silence and recognize his contributions to the city, to Water and Light, and to the county commission as well. He was a long time in public service and very passionate. So I'm just going to take a small moment of silence to start. Thank you. We are able to support the family through the city with the use of the community center next week for his funeral, and I know Macy and Son will be out with additional information. Going into the meeting for the evening, I would first like to ask for, if no one needs to recuse themselves from the consent agenda, I would ask for a motion to approve the
So
consent
moved.
agenda. I have a motion from Commissioner Gormley.
I'll second.
And a second from Commissioner Christensen. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
And opposed, say nay. And the consent agenda passes unanimously. Have commissioners had an opportunity to review accounts payable and purchasing reports, and are there any questions?
Yes, and no questions here.
No questions.
Thank you. We will now go into our consultant and partner reports and welcome our forester, Brent Keller, to give us a report. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. Well, we have a loose end to take care of from one of last year's sales. 187 Road, Boise, finally got me a letter from Department of Revenue confirming officially that they paid their harvest taxes for the 187 Road sale. So that was the final contractual obligation for that sale. And so that's all buttoned up, and I recommend release of the performance and the payment bonds and the cash deposit of $25,000.
Any questions?
We just do that by simple motion, right?
Right, and so I think what our forester is seeking is a motion regarding the 187 road to release the performance and payment bonds and the cash deposit of $25,000 to Boise Cascade Forest Products.
So moved.
I have a motion from Commissioner Gorman
Second.
and a second from Chair Tate. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
And those opposed say nay. And the motion passes unanimously. Thank you.
And then on the 2024 current stumpage sales, Boise also bought one of this year's sales, the 304-1 road sale, but is planning to sit on that until next year. That was a 2-year contract. We did receive their half payment. Half of the estimated value was due in July, and we received that this week. So another half payment will be due next January, and they'll be harvesting that sale next summer. The 550 Road number 3 sale is humming right along like clockwork. All the cutting has been done for a while. They're finishing up logging and yarding the next few weeks, and then they'll probably be shipping, trucking from the sale for a few weeks after that. So they should be pretty well wrapped up by the end of August with that sale. And the way the payments and volume we're tracking, looks like we're going to come out right on or over my initial estimated volume and value for that sale. So things are going well. We've had to do quite a bit of road work in relation to that sale. So that's been most of the focus of the project work associated with the 550 road sale. Fire season officially began the 4th of July. And I wrote this letter in the morning on the 9th. And at that time, we were still at a level 1. By the afternoon, they'd moved it to level 2. So we've been at level 2 for about a week now. And I just got an email today from fire folks at Forest Grove and pointing out all the precautions folks need to be taking, but they are keeping the level at a 2 for now. It looks like temperatures are gonna be, pretty typical coming up here, so. Water and light, fire truck is at the treatment plant, and Bighorn Logging, who's the operator out there, has their fire equipment on site, so as far as fire preparedness goes, we're in good shape.
Thank you. Any questions?
No questions.
No questions.
All right.
Thank you so
Thank
much.
you.
Thank you so much.
We'll now begin our public hearings for the evening. It's now after 5 p.m. on July 16th, 2024, the time notice for a public hearing on water rates and charges. I'm as mayor and presiding officer and will conduct the hearing, impose reasonable time limits on participants, and receive documents and reports into the hearing record. At today's hearing, the commission expects to hear a staff report, during which I may recognize other members of the commission to ask questions. After the staff report, interested parties will be invited to ask questions. Before stating your question, please state your name and city you live in for the record. Is that adequate, or address? Today's meeting is being held in a hybrid format, both in person and digitally on Zoom. Any interested party that has joined the public hearing in Zoom is automatically set to be on mute and to have their video display hidden. At appropriate times during the meeting, I'll ask those in attendance whether or not they would like to speak. When this occurs, please select the raise hand option from your device, and the staff person managing the meeting will know that you'd like to ask a question. I'll give adequate time at these points during the meeting to ensure that we capture everyone that would like to ask questions of staff. If you're having difficulty using the raise your hand feature, you may also use the chat feature to type in and state that you'd like to speak. If you're calling in via phone and do not have access to the Zoom meeting, video, and toolbar, please wait until I ask if there's anyone on the phone who'd like to ask a question. I'll make sure that everyone who wants to participate in the public hearing has the opportunity to do so. After the staff report, the commission anticipates continuing the hearing to August 20th, 24 for additional comments of interested parties, a final staff report, deliberations of the commission, and adoption of new rates and schedules. No final decision will be made today. To begin, I'd like to turn it over to Trina McManus, utility rate analyst, to begin the staff presentation and introduce our rate consultant.
Thank you very much. In March of 2024, McMinnville Water and Light contracted with Utility Financial Solutions to conduct a water cost of service study. Historically, McMinnville Water and Light has conducted cost of service studies for water every 4 or 5 years, but we're now going to be doing them every 2 years to better track volatile material costs, long lead times, inflation rates, and capital project forecasting. We've seen a lot of movement in these areas over the last 2 years and just feel it will give us a better picture on how to move forward with this shorter time frame. Staff has been working closely with UFS over the last 4 months to provide data for the cost of service model and give feedback. Mr. Mark Beauchamp, president of UFS, is here with us tonight via Zoom and is prepared to share the cost of service analysis results with the commission. Mark, we'll go ahead and turn it over to you.
All right. Well, thank you, everybody. I appreciate the opportunity to talk to you about the work that we had done. I have with me Jillian Jursic, who really did most of the work on the project. So if you ask any detailed questions, I'm most likely going to refer to Jill. Because I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Oops,
Or if I
I'm
can
disabled.
allow you. Okay, try now, Mark.
There we go. Whoops, come on. There we go. Turn my camera back on. I mean, shut it off. Well, Anyway, I want to just start by normally, because we've been working with McMinnville for over 10 years, but I know there's a lot of new board members and are not familiar with Utility Financial Solutions. And so I'm going to tell you a little bit about our firm. We were formed in 2001, so we've been around for about 24 or 23 years. We teach costs of service from the American Public Power Association and American Water Works Association. And done work in 45 states, including several Caribbean islands. And what the purpose of this meeting is for is we did the cost of service and the financial modeling, and we're here to ask the direction from the board on two things. One is the rate adjustments. In other words, what the overall rate adjustment or rate track the board would like to see. And of course, I have some summary results as to the different impacts the different rate tracks will have. And when I say rate tracks, it's what the average rate increase will be. Um, then we're going to go through the cost of service study to say, okay, if we need X% increase, it's not necessarily going to be across the board. In other words, some rate classes may get a little more, some a little less. Some components of the rate may go up a little bit more than others. And that's the direction that I'm looking for from the board, from the commission tonight. So with that, before I get into the numbers, is there any questions at all about what we did or what we do?
Not hearing any.
All right. The very first part of doing a study or a rate study is to do a long-term financial model. And that model, see if I can turn my camera back on. There we go. That model looks out over a 6-year period. All right. And so we take your historicals and we project it forward. And we add to it things that are known and measurable in a sense, with things like capital improvement programs that are being projected. Your debt-free utility, if there was debt, we'd incorporate that in. We also incorporate things like increased sales, customer growth, what the projected inflation rates would be. And if you look at this table, it highlights or summarizes all of the significant assumptions that we made in developing the study. The first one, of course, general inflation, 2024, 5.1%. Right now, inflation, I believe, has dropped to around 2.6, I believe. And then we assumed 4% from this point forward. And then payroll inflation, how much payroll is going to change. Customer growth, and then the major thing, which is the capital improvement program. You can see that in 2024, we have about 3.5 million, going up to 13 million, 9 million, 10 million, then 3, and then 5. Now, one thing to always remember with a capital improvement program is these are ideally what we want to get completed each year. But the reality of it is a lot of times these capital improvement programs get carried over into subsequent years. So I just these are the absolute numbers, but that 13 million, some of that might go into 2026, just to give you an example. So these are the assumptions upon which this model was built. Now, this model is a summary of your financial situation without any rate adjustments. Now, to do this, we normally look at 3 financial targets that we establish that we want to see you achieve. The first one is debt coverage ratio, but you're debt free, so that's not even an issue. The second one is the minimum cash reserves that we've identified compared with what your projected cash reserves are going to be. And you can see that in looking at the cash reserves, we've separated it into 2 buckets. We have what's called operating cash that's readily available. And we also, for purposes of the board's consideration, we set up, in a sense, the projected cash balance in a timber fund. Okay, that timber fund can be used only for new capital improvements. At least that was the initial thought. And of course, all that needs to be considered by the commission. That's going to be in like August. The third target is the optimal cost of service income, which is about $4 million. And what that number represents is when you place an asset in service, and let's say it's $1 million asset with a 50-year life. And so every year, that you expense $20,000 of that through depreciation expense. And so theoretically, at the end of that 50 years, you've recovered $1 million for that asset. However, when you go to replace it, it's going to cost you more than $1 million because every year the replacement cost of that asset goes up. That optimal operating income, what that represents is the inflationary increase in the asset's replacement cost. And we use that more as an upper boundary when we establish a rate track. In other words, we want you to be above the minimum cash reserves, but below this optimal operating income number. So that is one of the key things. We want to keep you between those numbers. Now, we've established two rate tracks for the commission to consider. The first one, the smaller one, is an annual increase of 3.5%. But remember what Trina said is we're really looking at designing rates for 25 and 26. These adjustments that are in here, those are something that will, when we update the study, we'll come back and look at what is needed in the subsequent years. But now with this 3.5% rate track, you can see the adjusted operating income is below the optimal. It's where we want to be. The operating cash is between the two, the operating and the timber cash, about 24 million. And then it starts to drop. And of course, you see that in this year, it's a little over 13 million in 2029. Now, one of the things I want to caution you about is this recommended minimum reserves of $9 million. That was based on our previous analysis that we did to determine minimum cash reserves. Now, what you're going to see in August are some slightly different numbers, actually substantially different in water, in that we felt in looking at what your minimum cash reserve level should be, that you have a lot of risk out there with your timber revenue. And it's difficult to purchase insurance for that. So when we quantified everything, and like I said, you'll see this in another month, this minimum cash number came up to about $16 million. So if we did use that, then we're going to start falling below that number in 2027 under this scenario. So the other thing we looked at was an annual rate track of 5%. And so in this case, we designed rates for 2 years at 5%. If you look at this column, this identifies the average residential impact. It's about $1.80 in 2025 and about $1.90 in 2026. Those are monthly impacts. Now, with this rate track, you can see the adjusted income is again below the optimal where we want to be. The operating cash and timber cash combined, remember this number is possibly going to go up to 15 million. We're still falling slightly below that in these outer years, but we're close to it. And so the very first question for the commission, and in many ways the most important, is what rate track would you want us to set the rate track rates on? The 3.5 or the 5%. When we started this process, I'll be honest with you, I didn't really have a strong opinion because both of these kept you financially stable. But after we completed the cash reserve study, I feel that this 3.5% puts you at risk. And you may possibly have larger rate adjustments the next time the study is completed. Where with the 5%, it's protecting water against a substantial increase in those outer years. So it's my feeling, but what I think is not important. It's what you think is in the best interest of the community. And so, but that's the first and probably the major piece of direction that I'm looking for.
Do you want to go to conversation about that now?
I do, yes.
Okay. We'll open it up.
I'll start. I had concern last time we saw this. And he's went back to the well, so to speak, and has come back saying 5% is probably the better one. And I just think that's probably more wise at this point than having to use 7 or 8% 5 years from now or something. This is, I think there's more stability in doing 5% now into the future than there would be to 3.5. So I support the 5%.
Thank you. Anybody else?
I agree. We've always taken the approach where it's, we're raising it, but we're doing it in a way that's, it's a method that's looking at the long term, not just 1 year, right? We're always looking ahead. And this obviously, sets a different scenario. I guess I think about all the work that Jamie's doing and making sure that we have resources available to our customers to make sure they can, we can help, I don't want to say buy down the cost, but be prepared to address concerns from the community. But for the longevity and the right planning that we've been doing all along, this makes sense.
Yeah, I would just say that, our capital improvement budget is going to be continuing to increase over time. I mean, just with the cost of goods and the cost of labor to get things done, but the need to be able to respond to, the health of our network and future planning for resources and disaster recovery, especially, I think it's really important to continue to sort of make sure that those funds are protected and growing. And I know that we had a discussion, these projections look different than they did in 2022, and they're broken out differently because at the direction of the commission, we talked about keeping the timber sales revenue completely separate, and it was kind of mixed in previously. So I think it gave us a little bit of the way that you looked at it or what was presented looked maybe like the timber sales were having more to do with operating costs than they really are. And now we've been able to, definitely show that those are broken out. So I'm very much in favor of, I think 5%, it's less than, it's a small rate increase, but I think that it really helps us to continue to plan for the future where those capital improvement dollars are going to be really important. So I'm in favor of 5%.
Okay.
And I think that's also staff's recommendation is 5% as well.
I think the only thing that I didn't hear said was that if we're looking at the adjusted cost of service without timber as well entirely, it's not only the disaster preparedness, it would also set us up in, God forbid, in case of a disaster.
Right,
Mhm.
right.
And that's, so next month, what Mark, and Jill will be back next month to talk about the financial reserves policy. And so we're working on that draft as well, and that'll tie in again with what we're doing here.
Mhm.
As far as, last month or the month before we had, the insurance conversation, with Ryan Hartzell, and the reason that that's gonna go from the 8 or 9 to the 15 or 16 is because of taking 6 million in those reserves and putting them into a fund that basically
Right.
make sure that if we do have a fire or something up there, it is not gonna be something where we have to immediately raise rates to cover costs. We have time to work on a plan.
Yeah.
So,
Thank you. Keep going. Mark, do you want to keep going?
Yes, thank you so much. That is probably the major item. Well, I'm gonna go through next is the cost of service study. And if you're not familiar with it, what a cost of service study is once we determine the ideal or the optimal revenue requirements, which is this optimal operating income that you see right in this line. Once we determine what that is, we then identify how much it costs to provide service to each class of customers and compare that to the projected revenues from that class. So like the inside city, cost of service is 5.6, projected revenues 4.2. Obviously, this shows a 35% increase. But to meet that optimal situation, we would need a 30%. So actually, from a cost of service standpoint, compared to all the others classes, residential should get something close to the average increase, or in a sense at 5%. Outside city, which is a small class, the usage pattern is not as good as inside the city, so they show 68. This is the meter charges. In what should happen with the meter charges, in other words, like the 5/8 inch meter charge, theoretically should go up about 16%. And you can see that most of these are real close or consistent, not as close, but they're fairly consistent, except for one. And that is the 3-inch. And this is something that has happened since we started doing the water studies. So it must have been something the way that the rate was established over 10 years ago, because this has always showed up. So we typically don't increase the 3-inch meter charge, but we do increase the others, and that's because of what the study is showing. The other one is like the bulk fill station. Now the bulk fill station, what this is you have customers typically outside the city, and they don't have access to McMinnville's water. They have well water, and so there's periods of time where they can't get enough water. So what they do is they'll come and take water, in a sense, from this bulk fill station. And when that happens, it's traditionally during the summer months when the system is peaking. So you see that the bulk fill station shows an increase of almost 47%. And then fire protection, 18.5. Now, that's what we use as guidance to proportion that 5% increase. And one of the key parts of it is this meter charge. I'll come back to the other slide in a moment. But if you look at like your 5/8 inch meter, which is most of your customers, you're currently charging them about $14.80 a month. Facilities charge, and the cost of service study says it should be closer to 17. It's not way out of line, but when we do the rate adjustments, we probably want to give a little bit of an increase to that fixed monthly customer charge. For every one of these classes, with the exception of the 3-inch, because you're charging 146, cost of service is 143. So what we'll do is in the rate design, we'll tweak these customer charges, but we're not going to make any dramatic adjustments to it. Now, there's the customer charge or facilities charge, it goes by different names, is probably one of the least understood charges that utilities have. Electric, water, wastewater, gas, they all charge it, but customers don't understand why. They sometimes it's related to Dunkin' Donuts, in that a Dunkin' Donuts doesn't charge you to walk through their door. Why does the utility need to charge you a fixed charge just to have service? Well, there's a big difference between Dunkin' Donuts and a utility, because like a Dunkin' Donuts, they make an investment on behalf of the community. But a utility makes an investment specifically for each and every customer. If you have a meter at your home, the utility had the cost to install that meter. They also have the responsibility to repair it, to replace it, to read it every month, to send the customer a bill. We have customer service personnel available to answer questions. And then they have a service drop from the mains out in the street to their homes. Those are all fixed costs that do not vary based on consumption. So from a fairness standpoint, that should be rolled into the fixed component of the rate. Now, there is a portion that is sometimes controversial in that the lines out in front of the street, the question becomes how much of those lines, costs associated with those lines, should be allocated to the meter charge, and what amount should be allocated to usage. And what we do, and it's fairly standard in the industry, is we look at what the minimum sizing requirements are of those mains. And we roll into the meter charge the cost associated with the minimum sizing. Of course, the mains are bigger than just the minimum sizing, and that additional cost is rolled into the usage component. These are the charges that make up that meter charge. And utilities have, over years, have become more and more focused on getting that meter charge where it needs to be, especially in the era in electricity, you have energy conservation. In water, you have water conservation. So usages are going down. So by having a meter charge set appropriately, not only is it more fair to customers because the usage component's lower, but it also creates a certain amount of stability in revenue collection for the utility itself. Is there any questions about how the meter charge was calculated?
Yeah, we have a few questions. We'll start with Commissioner Gormley.
So Mark, if you had no revenue generated from the meter charge, the water rate itself would have to compensate for that, correct?
Absolutely, yes. It would be substantially higher.
Okay, so help me understand. Today, I can't think of a meter being installed short of a replacement, but new meters being installed that the installer of the meter, I should say, or the service is paying for that entire thing, and the only thing that Water Light contributes is they drop the meter in the spot.
Yeah,
So
we still have the responsibility long term. In the short term, that's your connection policy.
but for
But in the
decades,
long term, oh, go ahead.
but for decades now, in developments, the developers have built the infrastructure, and we basically put the meters in. So it's kind of, again, the reality is that a lot of these things we're not actually building, they're being built by our clients. And
I'm
I guess
gonna
it's like
get in.
a demand charge.
No. Yeah, that's a great question. I want you to think about it a little bit differently, in that when you have a new customer come on, there's two types of expenses. There's the expense to run the line to the customer, and there's also the impact that they create on the water treatment system itself, just the treatment plant. And that impact may not be felt for several years. But normally when you add a customer, that charge that's assessed to them also includes that impact. Now, I don't know if you're really charging those impact fees to those customers. What we're doing
I don't think so.
here is just from a rate setting standpoint,
So again, I want to.
because we do have that responsibility
In
to
the end,
repair it, to
somehow,
replace it.
we have to collect enough money to keep the doors open. And you're presenting to us in your cost of service study methodologies that show different places to generate this revenue. Which in turn, if you didn't have the meter charge, et cetera, every cubic foot of water would have to be bumped that much more, so.
Correct.
Okay, I just,
That is correct.
so I'm gonna use that parallel that, so demand charges are, I guess, an impact cost, if you will, that we get on the electric side, because it says if you need 100 kW and you don't use it, we still got to figure out how to pay for it, and that's
Well, we still have to provide the facilities to supply them
Correct.
at any time.
Whether you.
so. But anyway, it's interesting because there's so many different ways to spin the bottle. So
There is, and I want to dig a little deeper into it also. Right now you have what's called an inclining block rate structure. In other words, for the first 1,000 CF, it's a lower rate than anything above it. And part of that is because when we do these allocations and we allocate a minimum sizing requirement for every customer, that minimum sizing requirement has a certain amount of capacity within it. And that's recovered through the meter charge. And so in developing that inclining block rate, we're actually adjusting for the recovery. I don't want to call it over recovery because it isn't, but for the capacity that's allocated in that meter charge portion. So that's credited back to the customer through that first rate block. Does that make sense? So in a sense, we have a meter charge that includes some capacity. Then we have a first block rate that is lower to give them back the capacity that they have already paid for through the meter charge.
And then your second tier is higher to cover the additional capital required to have upsized pipes for the higher capacity.
Correct. That is correct.
Additional questions?
Does that make some sense? So in a sense, what it's doing is you're stabilizing your revenue, but you're giving it back to customers in that first block.
Do you have any follow-up?
the other interesting thing that's going on is the model codes are all changing, and you have low flow toilets, low flow faucets, all sorts of things to the point of where we years ago might have used 1 inch or 3/4 inch pipe to do a house. The service lines and stuff inside the building are being done with 1/4 inch tubing because the faucets and everything are designed around that. So that conservation creates grief for us as a utility because we've got to have the water available to them, but now you're not using as much as you had until you
Correct.
turn
And you still have
turn on a
that
hose bib and
fixed,
start- yeah.
and you still have that fixed cost associated with
Absolutely.
labor and the infrastructure. So, and that's what we're trying to recover as a portion of that.
I have a question. If you could go back 3 slides, are you satisfied?
Yeah, thank you.
If you could go back 3 slides to where we're talking about we have the bulk water rate as well and the distribution among the different service lines for, yeah.
That one.
That one, yeah. So, on the percent, is our bulk water at the same rate as the water inside? It's
So there's, Trina, customer charge is higher, but I don't remember if the water's
It's
outside.
outside.
I think it's outside rate,
Outside rate.
correct?
It's
Trina?
outside city rates, yeah.
It's outside city rates, okay, already. And why is that change 46.9 as opposed to the other outside city consumption being at a higher rate?
Most of that is due to consumption, uh, patterns of consumption. And in the modeling, what we do is we look at what the monthly usages are for each of these classes. And the best way to describe it is, let's say you have one customer that uses 1,000 CCFs or CFs every single month. All right. And let's say 1,000 CFs in capacity costs $12. That 1,000 CFs, you're getting the billing for it every single month. Okay. So the rate, in a sense, $12 divided by 12,000 CFs is basically $1 per 1,000 CF. Now, let's say you have a customer, say like the outside city, say their usage pattern is different. And instead of using 1,000 CF every month, they use 1,000 CF for 8 months. But during the summer months, let's say they use 4 CF. So that customer is being assigned in the study 4 CFs of capacity because that's what they're contributing to the system. So if that rate, they're using 4, so instead of being $1 per unit, the cost of it is actually 12 times 4. So now it's $48. And we have to divide that by all of their billing units, which would be 16 plus 8 would be 24. So their charges are going to be in excess of $2 per unit. And it's basically all driven on their usage patterns, how they use water. You have some customer, oh, go ahead.
So in the bulk fill station, most of that usage occurs in the summer.
Correct.
And so that's why it would be higher.
Yeah.
That's correct. Yep.
Yeah, and so my concern there, and this is not really necessarily germane at this time, because it would have to do more with like the direction of how we were selling water, and I understand it's a separate conversation. My concern there is that the scenario you provided painted a picture for me of somebody living just outside of town and they're on a well and they need to take a shower and drink some water and brush their teeth. But I know that there are other scenarios that exist too. It was a couple of years ago, kind of very controversial. Somebody was filling up water here to truck it to their marijuana farm where they didn't have any water access. And so just as we're kind of looking to the future and we are having more and more drought conditions, et cetera, as we think about all the ways that bulk water could be used out in the world, it gives me, I guess the question is that we can't answer right now, is the importance of like the bulk water to the overall, is that a direction that we want to, is that something that we want to be doing? Especially as we do more long-term planning and are looking at how to support our region generally, what if that water is leaving our region entirely? Is that to the benefit? So those are just some of the thoughts I'm having around that. And Commissioner Gormley.
Actually, those questions were the same ones that we had, that staff had. And what you're going to see in the recommendations is to move that bulk fill station rate up to that 47% increase over a 2-year period. Because right now your rate is very competitive, very good. And their usage pattern, I mean, they have a bigger impact on the system because it's all summer usage. So the intent is to move that bulk fill station rate to the cost of service results over a 2-year period. Does that make sense?
So Mark, this is Ed. Why do why do we have that in there in the first place? Why is the bulk fill station in there?
Why do we have it?
Well, the bulk-
Well, no, I know why we have it.
Okay.
Because there's a great history to it, but why does he have it in there? Is that something staff decided they wanted in this list, or?
No, because it's actually a rate. There's actually a rate tied with it.
Okay.
And
So if we didn't have the bulk fill station, what would we do?
people would then be wanting to get hydrant meters from us.
Which is what we did for years and years, and then Bob Klein built that.
Right.
But once it was built, it's built. And the only maintenance that I'm aware of we have to do is to test the RP device annually, unless you're telling me we got,
There's other maintenance like the meter, because it's now electronic. So cards, people have to come in and get a card.
oh, so now that, okay.
It's not like a hydrant meter, because a hydrant meter is assigned to one
Sure.
customer.
Yeah,
Where this is assigned to, I think we have 50 or 60 customers. I don't remember the exact number, but there's
Mm,
multiple customers using that. And we have contractors using it too to fill up, for projects instead of having to,
dust trucks, things like that.
to get a hydrant meter, they'll come out here to use the bulk fill station.
But, I guess I'm trying to figure out, it's built.
Yes,
And so you, at some point, had the electronic card reader in there.
there's costs. So
I mean, so I can see the charge per cubic foot, but
But then also that one is, those are customers that are not within the city limits.
Okay.
They're out, most of those customers are outside the city limits.
so why would we wait and do it over a 2-year period?
I think it was just rate shock. It's probably.
Yeah, that's the main reason. That was my recommendation. And it mainly was driven on rate shock. I was just hesitant to do almost a 50% increase in 1 year on the.
okay, but I think it's important the board understands that this is a fixed structure built that has, and you correct me, but minimal maintenance.
It does.
And that we're not digging into
Yeah.
tens of thousands of dollars. So this is a,
Yeah, I see what you're saying.
okay,
Yeah.
This is a small station, but it does have a decent amount of maintenance that goes along with it. Staff has to go out there on a regular basis because customers have trouble accessing it. Some people
Mm.
drive away with the hose hooked up still,
Yeah,
and we
that
gotta
happens
go
with
out and fix
computers.
things. If the reader's not working right, we've got admin costs ongoing that go into it. So there are significant costs that continue to go that are spread over a small.
but those
number
should
of
all be
months.
part of the buried in the, part of the rate that we're assessing, so.
I
And
kinda-
again, as Remy and Mayor brought up, money leaving, water leaving our area was never the intent of this. This was a convenience thing because the staff got tired of having to deal with all of the meter subs.
What was happening before is they were filling up in our yard.
Yeah,
Which that was this huge security.
it was a great idea to Bob Klein that, so it's worked out great.
So I know it's a small number. I think the mayor brought up though that, as the environment changes, this could become, and I think because of the majority of the waters leaving the community, it is a service that we're providing. It should be treated as we treat water that we sell.
100% cost.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I appreciate the sticker shock. But let's build it in because we've got to make sure that we're not covering, that we're not subsidizing
Giving it away.
this
Yes, good point.
Yep, good
process.
point.
Yeah.
And so it sounds like the commission would want to move that to full cost of service this year.
Well, that's one commissioner's comments, but that's,
So how much revenue we have? Okay, it's
It's not a-
32,000 is what's projected and it would go to full. So are we just recovering the 48 is what we're after, which is 16? Okay,
it's in and out equal.
You're just over $3 a 100 cubic foot right now, and if we went to full cost of service year 1, you'd be just over $10 per 100.
Ooh, that feels hard.
okay, but what do you get for $10 though?
I mean, it depends on how much they take, but we've got a couple users that are pretty significant out there, and then you've got quite a few, probably 50 out of the 65 customers are very, they're filling 500-gallon tanks, so it's a very small number that would impact them, but some of the larger users that are feeding either dairies or different farms, it would be in a few $1,000s over the year.
Okay, help me understand though, when somebody fills up out there, is there a $10 fee in addition to the,
Customer charge.
okay,
There is
It's
a
about
customer charge.
$18 a month right now for the fixed charge.
So when you say 18, if I'm coming every month to get water from you, you're charging me $18 plus the flow.
Yeah, $18
And
one
that's
time
gonna,
for the
and
month.
that's,
then the
so to
flow.
answer the board's question, then what's that gonna go to then? That'll become 36 and,
The 18 is only gonna go up to about 21 is what we're looking at, I believe. And then it's the
Yeah.
consumption piece that's gonna take the big jump.
okay. which
Going
is-
from $3 to $10.
Yes.
That feels hard.
Yeah.
But what do you get, okay, help me understand. Right now for $3 we get what? 100 cubic feet?
Yes,
And now we're gonna charge $10 for that same 100 feet.
yes.
Okay. Okay, you know, this
It's
is.
still a good deal to have that water available though, when you think about it.
Yeah, there are people that fill up out there that have no water, period.
Well,
Their wells that went dry and they ever have arsenic in their water and they don't want to treat it.
the thing to remember, most of the smaller ones are filling up 250 gallons at a time, so a third of a cubic, 100 cubic feet, not. So you were talking probably right now, what is it, $1 something worth of water?
Yeah, it's very, very small. And
That would be-
another concern with going to full cost of service in year one is that we still have to maintain the overall percentage increase that we decide upon. So we talked about the overall 5% increase. If we take the bulk fill station up to 100% all the way to cost of service year one, it impacts our ability to change some other rate structures. So we felt it was
Oh,
important to kind
okay.
of spread that out a little bit. Make sure that in the residential category, we can get those consumption numbers where we need them to be to have those small incremental increases. And we didn't have that like flexibility in there when we initially took it up, because our initial thought was, yes, take the bulk fill station up to 100% cost of service. But then we decided to back off and just do half of that year one and the second half year two to give us the ability to spread those costs through all the different classes.
I appreciate that. Thank you, Trina, and I'm comfortable with that scenario.
So Trina, your recommendation to us is to let the 2 years be the timetable then.
Yes.
Okay,
Yeah, I'm comfortable with that. I think that what I would love to do is kind of revisit just how we view bulk water from a policy decision
I agree.
in the kind of near future, and also with that, evaluate what the reverberations are going to be or potentially be. What aren't we thinking about that, how, you know, who, it's not just a dollar amount, right? There's other impacts. So kind of being thoughtful about that in that conversation.
are we still letting hydrant meters be used? Okay.
All right, any additional questions?
Good discussion, thank you.
All right, we're ready to go forward. Thank you.
Let's see. We talked about this. Okay. Now, in the usage charges that we're looking at, this is the breakdown. Like your first block of rate is currently $1.73 for inside city. The cost of service study said that's pretty much right in line, $1.76. But the excess, which is $1.97, about $2, should go up to about $3.30. Now, this is similar to what was done last time. And of course, our intent was to phase this in slowly to keep moving, in other words, fixing or close to fixing that first block and giving all the increase to the inside city in that outer block consumption rate to continue that movement toward cost of service. This up here is the inside, down here is the outside city rates that are, you know, in each block. And then this is the bulk fill. This is what you're currently charging them. And the cost of service study says it's $10. So when we do the rate designs, our intent would be to keep that first block relatively unchanged. We may have to give it a little increase, but to put most of the increase for the residential in that excess tier. Does that make sense?
Lots.
So this is what we've actually, let's go to 5%. this is what we were actually looking at proposing. Is for the first block, $1.74 would go to $1.76 and stay there for the 2-year period. Over 1,000 cubic feet would go from $1.97 to about $2.09, and then to $2.23. So the first block's going up about 1.3%, and the outer block about 5.9%. That's in the first year. And this was our initial thought on the rate structure. Do you agree with what we've done? We're, like I said, we're using the cost of service study as direction.
Okay.
And the direction from the cost of service study is that the first 1,000 cubic feet rate is very close to cost of service. And the over 1,000 cubic feet is substantially below cost of service. So that tells us that the increase, most of the increase, should go into that outer block.
Okay.
All right.
Okay,
Yes.
So
Yeah, just another way. to put that.
So the next steps is for us to go back and to develop the rate design using a 5% rate track. To increase the 5/8 inch or 3/4 inch meter by something less than $1 a year, just a slight adjustment. To increase block 2 more than block 1. The hydrant charges, all the hydrant charges would go up by $1 per year. And to move the bulk fill station rate to cost of service over that 2-year time frame. Do you have any concerns over what we've listed as next steps?
I think, Mark, did you skipped over the creation of block 3?
Oh, yes, I did.
So that goes through that logic.
Yeah, the next time we do a study, what we're looking at is we'll get additional detailed billing stats and run it through the cost of service modeling. Because what we're thinking about is seeing if there's justification for a third block, which would be even more expensive. So we'd have block 1, block 2, and block 3. But that's not what we're proposing this year. It might be something that we would be proposing in 3 years.
And I think the thought process from staff was that would then reduce the cost in block 2 and move some of those costs to block 3
Yeah, that makes sense.
for those higher users.
Mhm.
So how many clients do we end up with block 3?
Well,
Less than,
It depends on where you set the difference between block 2 and block 3. Which they haven't just set. But it could be we have some fairly large users of the system.
that they're
Winery
not
or-
wasteful users either.
No, but we have like the mill, Organic Valley is another big user. There's some very large users that, put a lot of demand on the system. We want to make sure that we're not, other, users aren't subsidizing those because of the increase in capacity that we need for pipe or treatment plant or whatever we have.
Makes sense.
That's why we thought about a third block.
Do you mind walking us through the hydrant charge increase a little bit?
Yeah, I don't recall what the current hydrant charge
I think
is.
it's $5.47. Is that right? Julia?
Yeah, that sounds right.
Are these hydrants that
Yeah.
we furnish and rent back, or are these hydrants on everybody's property?
These are all the fire hydrants within the city limits, so we've got
So,
just under 1,200 of them.
so lots of them on properties with big parking lots.
Oh, those are
That are
private
available.
hydrants, those are separate,
Okay. So we have 1,200.
just public hydrants.
Public hydrants.
Yes.
that we install, we maintain, we replace.
And who pays us that money? The city?
Well, the city used to pay us about $75,000 a year through the fire department, so that's one of the questions we've been talking with the fire district about that cost. So
And what's the feedback from the fire
I
district?
think they feel that they shouldn't have to pay anything. But I think the problem we have with that staff's issue is the fact that the fire district serves not only the city. The city's limits are 12 square miles, but they serve the outside the 93 square miles, and that would then mean that the citizens of McMinnville are subsidizing the rest of the district. And so I think that's the conversation that we need to have.
Hmm.
Well, in the city,
remember
the citizens
correctly-
have been subsidizing it for some time because we are seriously under cost of service for fire hydrants and have been for a very long time. So $5 does not come close to covering the cost.
No,
So those
The,
are conversations I've had with the fire district.
The other thing built into everything we've done for decades is the sizing of the pipe.
Well, that's the other thing. Whenever we put a hydrant out, it's a minimum 6-inch pipe. Is that correct, James? That's correct. So it's at least 6.
So we give fire flow to the fire department that other places don't have
Correct.
because of
Right.
methodology.
And I'm glad you brought that up, because that's exactly how we, sorry about that.
I'm done, thank you.
That's exactly how we model the cost, is that additional sizing requirement on the distribution system. And that's what we use to develop the cost of service study for fire protection.
And then the other thing we probably should mention too, Mark, is part of that fire protection category is also fire lines that to individual businesses.
Correct.
There's a separate rate for that as well.
Yeah, that's both.
So to make sure I'm understanding correctly, the monthly charge would go up $1 a month, and that essentially, that charge is to offset the cost of maintaining the system, and then there is no charge on the flow.
I think
Correct.
it's $1 a year.
Oh, it's going up $1 a year.
A
$1
dollar per hydrant per month.
Oh, okay.
Oh, yeah, I think that's a miss.
Oh, okay.
Should be $1.
I was gonna say, that doesn't seem bad at all.
Yeah.
It was supposed to be per month,
Per month, okay.
We'll change that.
$1 per hydrant.
per month.
per
Yes,
month.
per hydrant, per month.
So that'd be $120 a month increase.
Be 1,200.
1,200.
1,200.
We had 1,200 of them.
1,200. Oh, yes, 1,200. You're right.
There's
Sorry.
a lot of costs associated with those because you gotta flow those and flush them and,
Mhm.
change gaskets and do maintenance and stuff. So yeah.
Stores adapters, everything that.
Yep, yep,
was
So I think it would be useful, especially in our conversations, to talk about, the cost of maintaining that part of the system broken out as thoroughly as possible, so that when we're having the conversations with the fire district, we can show that there is actually still a subsidy that's happening, and also underline that that we are, of course, getting the water at no cost as well, so.
And I think Mark has that broken out as a separate line items. Is that correct, Mark? I think you just lumped them together.
That is, we have a whole detailed analysis on it that can show exactly what you said.
That's all, that's all my questions.
I'm good.
Okay, I think we're ready to move forward.
Yeah.
Do you wanna, just questions on this at this point, or?
Yeah, if there's anything at all, I just want to thank everybody for the direction and the input. We do these studies. The main thing that we're trying to do, I can sit and make recommendations, but the main thing is that for you to make decisions that you feel are in the best interest of your community. And our job at that point is to tell you the positives and negatives. And you've given us that feedback, and I really appreciate it. And that feedback was so good. Thank you.
Yeah, okay, so no additional questions from the commission? Okay, do we have anyone on the phone, Trina?
We do have Mark Davis that has joined us on Zoom. I don't see that he's raised a hand. Mark, if you want to raise your hand, if you wanted to comment at this time.
Yeah, so if we don't have any, so we're gonna go into the public comment portion. So if we have no one on the phone and one person on Zoom, that's what I understand.
Correct.
Okay. So we'll just give it another moment. Mark, if you want to make any public comment. And if not, then
I could talk for a long time if you give me the option, so.
Different Mark.
Oh.
You don't,
Different
oh,
Mark.
that
Wrong
Mark,
Mark.
okay.
sorry.
Wrong Mark.
Okay, Mr. Davis, thank you. I saw your no comment remark. Thank you. Okay, so we so now we would like to announce a continuation of the public hearing to August 20th, 2024 at 5:00
Yeah.
PM.
And Madam Mayor, maybe before we do that, we'll just have you accept into the meeting record pages 32 through 49, which includes Mr. Boshaw's report, the memorandum, and also the published notices that were put in the News Register.
I'd like to accept into the record pages 32 through 49, Mr. Beauchamp's report, and the meeting notices that were all entered into the record, please.
And then probably just a motion to continue the hearing to August 20th at 5 p.m.
Okay, I have a motion from Commissioner Gormley to continue the
I'll
public
second.
hearing to August 20th at 5 p.m. and a second from Commissioner Christensen. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
And opposed, say nay. And the public hearing is continued and closed for today. Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody.
Thank you.
Take care, Mark.
Okay, thank you. We are now going to have a second public, continuation of a public hearing from June 18th, 2024. It is after 5 p.m. on July 16th, 2024, the time scheduled for a continuation of a public hearing on McMinnville Water and Lights Integrated Resource Plan for Electricity. This public hearing was first opened on June 18th, 2024. As mayor and presiding officer, and will conduct the hearing, impose reasonable time limits on participants, and receive documents and reports into the hearing record. At today's hearing, the commission expects to continue with public comment and a final staff report. Before you make your comments, please state your name and where you live for the record. During the public comment and staff report, I may recognize other members of the commission to ask questions. Interested parties will be invited to ask questions. We are operating in a hybrid digital format on Zoom. If you're watching on YouTube, you will need to go to the Zoom meeting as provided in the published notices and on the website in order to join the meeting. Anyone on Zoom is automatically set to be on mute and to have their video display hidden at the appropriate times during the meeting. I'll ask those on Zoom whether or not they would like to speak. If so, use the raise your hand or the chat feature. And I will also ask if there's anyone on the phone that would like to provide public comment. And I will make sure that there is adequate time for everyone that wants to participate in the public hearing. We'll begin with an opportunity for interested parties to make comment on the proposed integrated resource plan. After those comments, we'll hear a final staff comment and have the opportunity to ask questions. I'll then accept materials into the record and invite the commission to deliberate before consideration of a resolution on the plan. To begin, I welcome our Power Resource Manager, Ms. Jamie Phillips, to start us with any written comments received since we last continued the public hearing on June 18th.
Thank you. We have received no written comments or otherwise, no comments.
Okay, I would like to open the continued hearing. Well, I already did that, so that's efficient.
You might ask Mr. Davis if he has any, if he's still online.
Okay, would anyone like to provide public comment, Mr. Davis, or otherwise anyone on the phone or on Zoom?
Just Mr. Davis, and I don't see a hand raised.
Okay, then we will move to any questions from Commissioners, at this time, then we'll move to the final staff report.
Okay, thank you. And I'd like to recognize, joining us is Garrett Cole from EDS Consulting, here on Zoom. You met him last month. So after the presentation of the draft report in June, excuse me, staff and worked with the consultants to make edits and revisions to the document per the commission's feedback. So I'll just briefly touch on those revisions. They are in the report that was in the packet. So the probably the biggest one is updating the graphic figure 4.2 on page 10 to align the load forecast with kind of what we were projecting internally. So you'll see there that now reflects the need for a tier 2 resource in 2029, and also depicts separately the Priest Rapids, Wanapum resources and the Riverbend resource in that bar chart. So that was some helpful feedback from the commission, and also included some further clarification on Oregon's RPS requirements and how that's impacting our utility on page 8, and some further clarification and conclusions on some different resource options and making those emphasizing those conclusions in the report. So
Thank you.
I mean, nothing more to add regarding the report. Those are the changes that were made.
Thank you. Any questions?
No questions here.
No questions. All right. Any interested party questions? Anyone on Zoom want to ask any questions? And there's still no one on the phone, I'm assuming. Okay, thank you. At this time, I'd like to accept the written materials into the hearing record and ask for a motion, and then open the floor for any commissioner deliberations.
I have no more questions or comments.
I have no comment.
No comment.
And then would you need the motion? Or
We have for your consideration in adopting the integrated resource plan, there's resolution number 2024-14, a resolution by the city of McMinnville acting by and through its Water Line Commission adopting an integrated resource plan for its electric system. That's resolution 2024-14, adopting the plan.
I would entertain a motion.
I would move.
Of a motion from Commissioner Gormley
I'll second.
and a second from Commissioner Christensen, and I would ask clerk to poll the commission.
Yes, Mayor Drapkin,
Aye.
Commissioner Tate,
Aye.
Commissioner Gormley,
Aye.
Commissioner Christensen.
Aye.
And the resolution is adopted unanimously. Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Garrett Cole.
Yes.
Thank you,
Thank you,
Garrett.
Garrett.
Thank you, Garrett.
That was the easiest commission meeting I've ever been to. So that's great. You guys are exceptional.
Excellent.
Yeah, thank you all.
All right,
Thank you so much. Stay with us, please. So we'll go right back to you for a staff report on BPA.
Mayor, really quick, just to confirm, we are closing this public hearing as
Oh.
of 14 p.m.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yes, we're closing this public hearing at 6:14 p.m.
Great.
Thank you. And now maybe we go to you for staff report regarding BPA.
Okay, well, I have a staff report for you on energy conservation and does pertain largely to BPA. So BPA pursues energy efficiency as a resource, and we've seen that in the integrated resource plan that really is our lowest cost option for resources. And it's also guided through the Northwest Power Act and the Northwest Power Plan, which is produced by the Northwest Power and Conservation Council. So at the beginning of each 2-year rate period, Bonneville allocates energy efficiency incentive dollars to each of its power customers to acquire energy conservation in the rate period. And that is governed by an implementation manual that lays out the incentive options and the guidelines for the program. And over the years, McMinnville has developed a successful energy conservation program, and we've taken full advantage of the BPA allocation of dollars for those rebates. And in the last 10 years alone, that's resulted in calculated energy savings of approximately 3.5 average megawatts. And I put in here, yeah, that's enough to power over 2,000 homes for a year. So to provide some context there. And those savings accrue year over year because those measures have long lives typically. So we see that kind of residual effect of measures taken in previous years carrying forward. So in this current rate period, McMinnville's EEI budget is a little over $1.6 million. And that the rate period began last October. And to date, we have either spent or committed to over $1 million of that to customers. So we are on track to fully spend our allocation again this rate period and potentially be looking for additional funds. BPA does allow customers to share funds. So that's something we've taken advantage of in the past, basically borrowing against the next rate period from other utilities. Also recognizing that energy efficiency is our lowest cost resource. McMinnville is seeking ways to enhance our program by doing some self-funding of efficiency measures. And that's really what I want to get some guidance here this evening on. Staff is proposing to use a portion of the revenue that we receive from the state's Clean Fuels program to help with some utility self-funding of energy efficiency initiatives. In the last 2 years, McMinnville's realized revenue of over $300,000 from the sale of those credits. And we've used a little bit of those funds to help with the integrated resource plan and to do some staff training. But we recognize that that this revenue stream and the market for clean fuel credits is relatively stable as best as we can project at this point, and is something that we plan to continue to receive for the years to come, depending on what happens with the state program. But as we see it now, it looks to be a consistent revenue stream that we can rely on, and there's a market for these clean fuel credits that allows for relatively reliable sales. So there's a demand for them. And the state also does not restrict how utilities can spend the revenue. So that allows us to look at what best serves our own ratepayers and customers and system and invest those funds accordingly. So by investing in energy efficiency, we provide the greatest benefit to all of our ratepayers by reducing our power costs and therefore our retail electric rates. So staff has considered multiple options and different ways that we can use the funds or that we can best serve our customers through energy efficiency. And I proposed a few ideas here in the memo that we feel would be measurable and easily implemented and provide, an opportunity for the most customers. The first being an adjustment to the interest rate that we charge for conservation loans. Currently, we charge the LGIP rate plus 2.5%. And rates being what they are, that currently that rate is exceeding 7%. It's becoming less competitive to our ratepayers. They're able to fund their projects elsewhere. And so we're proposing to consider removing that 2.5% adder and allowing our interest rate to cover the LGIP rate that, and, you know, there's further work we can do there. We can set a floor, we can set a minimum, we can assess, you know, what our costs are that we're trying to recover, but essentially it's the cost of that money that we're not investing.
Mayor?
Yeah.
Kind of questions. Do you have any issues with this, with dropping it and not collecting? As our attorney?
As the attorney for expenditure of funds? Is that your
And-
question?
The recommendation coming from Jamie about cutting the interest rate.
Oh, well, we can certainly, as a utility, and this has been litigated, that utilities can use their funds for energy efficiency purposes. So if the utility decides that that's a, you know, a valid energy efficiency and encouraging energy efficiency is something you want to do, I think the utility can do that.
So if Jamie's saying the money, they can go get the money elsewhere. The question is, do they still do the project then? Okay,
So-
which, I mean, in the end, that's what we want done, so. They obviously see benefit from doing that, or they wouldn't borrow the money elsewhere, and this is cheap commercial money, when you think about it, it really is. So I don't know.
Yeah, there's additional analysis that needs to be performed. We want to fully understand what that financial impact is.
If
In
we're,
the,
if we're losing business because of that number, I guess is not quite.
yeah, if we are,
Cases.
yes,
And-
if customers are not pursuing measures because of the
They
financial
would have to be able to go
obstacles.
somewhere to get a loan, so that's their option would be here. And then they don't pursue the measure because the rate's so high.
Mhm.
Okay.
And so we're not proposing to go lose any, lose revenue because we're going to the LGIP, which is what we would get if we had it invested.
And again, all of these are ideas. We're brainstorming. I welcome the feedback and the input from the commission to whether to you feel these are options to pursue or further discuss. Second one there is reducing the fee portion of the rebates that McMinnville retains. That is currently at 25% of each dollar, with the exception of low income measures. Those customers receive 100% of the rebate. That fee is intended to cover our overhead costs and program administration. And there's an opportunity there to kind of self-fund that cost or a portion of it. So currently our program is entirely our overhead costs, staff time and consultants and materials. That's all funded through the EEI dollars and not through our not directly through our rates and our budget. So there's an opportunity there. Another one that we've considered is offering special promotional rebates in addition to the BPA rebate. So for instance, a heat pump rebate for a customer can range from $600 to $900. And when you look at the cost of an installation of that, it's usually exceeds $15,000. And so there's a big discrepancy there that maybe we can help bolster that rebate to incentivize more customers to make those investments and realize some measurable kilowatt hour savings. And so these are things that we want to kind of try out different options, see what the response is, do it for a fixed amount of time and offer those kind of promotional incentives. Maybe it's a double your heat pump rebate in the summer months or something to generate some interest and gauge response from our customers. And then we have better information on what things we should pursue, what benefits the utility and the customers the greatest.
Commissioner Gorman?
Have you sat down and taken the Energy Trust rebate list and ever compared it to what we do?
Not,
Because that's market. And so water heaters are anywhere from $500 to $700. Terminal AC units, if they're a heat pump, there's a big rebate. I see these on commercial projects.
So that would, yeah, okay.
And our goal here is to get those megawatts because they're, $43 for a megawatt at BPA if we pull those megawatts from our current. And that extends our tier one.
I think I've told you before that PGE, PGE had figured out they could, by converting all water heaters to heat pump water heaters or having control devices on, like the code requires now,
Demand response.
70 megawatts power they could cut. So that's a lot. So,
And Jamie, the last time when we were talking about the BPA costs, wasn't there a component in there that if we spent our own dollars on this type of conservation or that there was, I mean, we'll get added benefit also by getting a little bit of something back for spending our own money, is that correct? Not
Well,
having it be
so
all EEI.
I think you're referencing the adjustment to our contract high water mark and that receiving back 50% of that, those energy efficiency savings. And that was for 2012 through 2023. So that
We missed the window.
is, yeah.
Well, maybe another window.
But we, looking ahead, it never hurts to save kilowatt hours and it may benefit us in that way or some other way. Aside from just our power costs in the future, in the next contract.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
So this would also kind of allow us to explore offer rebates that either add to the ones that BPA offers or offer rebates that BPA does not recognize. One of those, well, BPA does offer an EV charger rebate, but it's very small. I think it's $5 or $10. So that's another one that we've considered, and while that doesn't result in kilowatt hour savings, it does provide valuable data to staff in how that power is being used and helps us to better kind of plan our electric system more efficiently. So again, these are some ideas. This is definitely a work in progress, still analyzing financial impacts and weighing options and also considering how we may want to roll something like this out, how we may want to plan our budget and how much money we want to allocate toward this over what time period so that we have some parameters around this effort so that it doesn't have just sort of an open-ended timeline and funding, and that way we can really manage the information, the data, and the customer expectations.
And our goal, and the long-term goal is to get those kilowatt hours or megawatt hour savings to extend our, to have a bigger pot essentially of our tier one application.
Well, I'm happy to go first on this. So I'm most drawn towards the latter two options, and there's a couple of reasons, but one of them is because I feel like it will be good it will be easier to market to the community. I don't know how flexible all of the energy efficiency incentives can be. If I remember correctly, isn't there a window incentive through Water and Light years ago? So it's not only about, it could be broader than just switching out heat pumps. And I think doing like a promotional rebate opportunity, you enlist, you basically enlist private business to go out and advertise it for you because they'll go door to door and knock and say, hey, this is a limited time offer. We'd love to do this work for you. So I think that there's a lot of benefit to that. And then of course it's going towards your long-term goal. And you're making big direct impact in the lives of our community members. And so I like all those aspects of it.
And just maybe the second bullet point, I think also is a way to fund a portion of this too, because what Jamie's talking about there is we are getting the 25%, our costs are less than 25%.
Mhm.
So it would be another potential pot of money to put into the rebates as well.
And then the thing that I like about the charger station, it doesn't aim towards the long-term goal. I heard that. However, it is something that we're under-resourced on in the city generally, or in the community, I should say, generally right now. And I like that it is, essentially research R&D that we're not paying out of pocket for. I think there's a great benefit to that. So I see the same that there's a benefit to the community. Of course, it's much broader, right? It won't only be it depends where it goes and all those variables, but I do like that there is impact to the community and marketing that's attached, that we can, promote this as a directive or, something that's coming out of the utility for the community. Those are my initial thoughts.
May I?
Yeah.
follow up? So are you speaking of a charging station installed for public use?
That's how I interpreted this.
Oh, okay.
Oh, I see.
But that's
Oh,
certainly
it
an
does
idea.
say. Okay, yeah, I misread it,
So
but
public
that's
use
what I was, thinking you were suggesting, so.
Gotcha.
And
We
that's
also
fine.
want to provide incentives for customers to let us know if they have chargers in their homes, and that was kind of what that was leaning toward, but
Okay.
but
Do
certainly.
we have a station here? No. Okay. They're moneymakers. But the capital cost, yeah, the rates they pay.
Well, there's a lot of rebates and you'd have to turn it over to like a charge point or somebody to manage it.
Because the money aspect.
Right, because swiping the card or whatever, going back and forth, the terminal I think essentially for.
Yeah, I mean, if it was on property though, you would think if it's just not just, but we wouldn't necessarily need a
We wouldn't have,
payment structure, right? You could literally just use the energy efficiency funds and people could just charge for free.
right,
The problem you end up sometimes with that is that the car manufacturers start developing databases with all the charge points and stuff, and people traveling really struggle sometimes. So you end up giving people, Farnham's got one at their
Right.
office, and they have people coming in off the street using it all the time. And it's not meant to be that.
People that come to get their water, they stop and charge their car. Awesome.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think John is probably, I'm wrong to speak for you, but I'm guessing that maybe you might not want to promote a lot of electric car charging. in
well, I mean,
McMinnville.
it's gonna take away our, obviously.
Whatever
we're-
overhead you're gaining.
Yeah,
from
we're
your
losing it right in the
efficiencies.
cars, but I mean, I think that. Ultimately, the goal is really to get as many megawatts as we can.
Yeah.
That's really our goal.
I think if that's the goal, I really lean towards doing these promotional opportunities. We make really
Yeah.
big
Good idea.
impact in the lives of community members.
Exactly.
Do,
I mean, we've done a significant amount of low income.
Mhm.
Because there's no cost.
Right.
That's great.
The rebates there are much higher than on income
I think we did a whole apartment complex.
with ductless heat pumps, yes.
So it's,
Nice.
do we tend to have, is there history of, does this community like rebates? Do they take advantage of it? Does it cost a lot of money to get the information out because people aren't?
No, I think we have a formula that's been working pretty well. I think there's ways that we can enhance it and maybe get some additional customers and, involved and make the rebates more attractive. And we can, I mentioned a heat pump offer, but we can do that across the board with all of the measures, windows, insulation.
Yeah, I like the idea of
Water heaters.
packaging.
So
And-
over the years, the staff actually held seminars for contractors on insulation and stuff like that.
Oh,
to-
nice.
To have them, it's business for them, much you talked about going door to door. This is, we gave them the tools to go out and sell these rebates.
I mean,
And that's how we used for years.
back in the early, 2008, 2009, we were second only to Seattle Light
Yeah.
in energy
Oh, wow.
conservation.
Yeah.
I
Let's
replaced
do
all the
that.
windows in my, I replaced all the windows in my house because somebody knocked on my door and said that Water and Light would pay the
Yeah.
majority of it.
And you have a new house that we can.
Lots of broken windows.
Yeah, we're thinking about, hey, let's do this again.
Wait a second. But I do also like what you brought up about, or John, sorry, what you just brought up about kind of focusing on low income residential as well. And I would be interested if there's something to explore in that where we did even more targeted promotional, how could we, you know,
Right.
how could we make even a, I don't want to say bigger, but continue to have impact in positive ways? Certainly.
Oh,
Yeah.
great.
Sounds
All
great.
right, well, I appreciate the feedback and we'll go back to the
Drawing
board. Share with you some future time. A plan.
All right.
Okay,
Thank you so much.
thank you.
Next, please, Mr. Mark Gunmeyer, our Finance Director. Floor is yours.
Thank you, Mayor, Commission. So it's audit time again, and started our audit last week. Auditors were here. As part of their audit procedures, they'll communicate with the commission, and they typically have done this through the audit committee. Their audit plan at the beginning of the audit, and then they at the end of the audit, they'll kind of do a wrap up with the audit committee. This year, scheduling was challenging. We just had a number of conflicts, and so we actually weren't able to set up the audit committee meeting for the start of the audit. And instead, the auditors offered to provide a letter to the commission. And their standards allow them to do that. And so they did that. The letter was attached to my staff report and provides the commission kind of what their plan is, what they would have communicated to the audit committee had we been able to meet. So this is just for information. If the commission has questions or wants to provide additional input to the auditors, auditors would be happy to meet, but not required. So just for information.
Thank you. Any questions?
Don't.
No, I don't have any questions.
One of the items that they mentioned, and I don't know whether this is just a canned list, but accuracy of customer billings.
Yeah, they look at a number of different areas, and they change them from year to year. Last year, they just called it customer billing or something, so they changed the title a little bit, but I think it's essentially the same thing. They look at our
Checking invoices.
it has to do with how we bill customers to make sure that the rates that are set forth by the commission
Okay.
are actually billing, that we're billing them that way, validate all that, make sure that everything is set up properly in the billing system, and we've been consistent.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. Great.
Good.
Thanks, Mark. Thank you so much.
You bet.
And Mr. Thomas will join us. Talk about payment type.
Yes,
matters.
John.
Thank you.
All right, in your packet, you'll find a memo comparing 3 different months of customer payments. The reason that we chose those 3 different years. July 2017 is the first year I started collecting the data, so that was the default. It gave us a good representation of pre-COVID numbers, lots of customers coming into the office. So kind of a baseline of kind of how payments were. The next month, July 2020, COVID hit, office was closed. You can see that we did have a few cash payments during that time because people still dropped cash in the Dropbox or mailed it in. So, but you can see kind of what that did to payments. And then May 2024, obviously, it's been a couple of years since we came to the commission to show kind of how payments have trended since we went to the no payment model for the credit card fees with NAIC. So we wanted to show you kind of how that has trended over those 7 years period. And as you can see, the checks have gone down quite considerably, which is we held as in office and even in the mail as one of our higher cost transactions for time and outside resources that we had to use to do those payments. One of the surprising things that we found was Smart Bill actually has increased And Smart Bill is the automatic payment that we will do here where we actually go and deduct out of a customer's account. We'll do that 2 times a month. Those numbers have actually increased, which was a surprise. So the increase to that, with the increase to credit cards, we now kind of have a 3-tier top where checks have now not been number 1 for the last 4 or 5 months, I want to say. They lost. They've always been number 1 by a large margin every month. So that we just wanted to update the commission on that and ask if you have any questions at this time.
Is Smart Bill the app?
No, so Smart Hub is the app.
Okay,
Smart Bill is the program that Water Life's had for as long as I can remember, where a customer comes in and just wants to have an auto payment. And we go and we just deduct it out of your bank
oh,
account.
so they have to come in and do that.
Correct.
So I use the app and it's automatically deducted, but
Do you
here's what
use
I,
your checking account or your credit card?
credit card.
So then you'll be referenced on this credit card.
Okay, gotta get those airline miles. What I love about it is when I open it up, it shows me how much we've decreased or increased in our usage to last year.
Yes, and they just recently did a redesign on that and it's really been nice.
I love it.
Yeah.
I'm turning a lot of lights off at our house.
The other thing that we like about it and it's good for Water and Light is the
Yes.
customer can pay that at their convenience. So we get a lot of payments after midnight. Between midnight and 4, there's customers that pay their bill.
Interesting.
And we don't have to touch it.
No,
and it
not
just
me.
happens.
Mine's auto.
It just happens.
Yeah,
Yep.
Nice.
great. Any additional questions or comments? Thank you very
Yeah,
much.
sure. You're welcome.
Thank
Thank you
you.
so much. You bet.
So now, Mary, do you want to take a short break for?
Yeah, so it is 6:42
Thank you.
PM and we will
Actually-
take a 10